All right, well, go ahead and get started. Hopefully you all had a great spring break. And it's glad to see everyone's back. And so today we have as I listed in the syllabus, we have an employer panel. We haven't done this in a long time. What I find really beneficial to students in this panel is the opportunity to give you and provide you perspectives from those folks who not only graduated most recently, but also have graduated and have been in the field for a good long time. So you have a lot of differing perspectives. At the same time also, they come from multiple industries. Okay, so I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll roll into the first question. And the first question is, as you introduce yourself, describe your current responsibilities, okay, and who you work for. And if you're hiring, go ahead and mention it, okay. But if I could have Nathan introduce himself first, since he's on virtual.
Yep, sure thing, Rich, and good morning, everyone. Wish I could be there with you, but I'm halfway across the country. So thanks, Rich, for the invitation. My name is Nathan Thomas. I graduated from UC in 2015. I did the ICP program, and now, as I mentioned, have relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina to work for Leone Wiring Systems, which is a company that I co-opted with while I was at UC. Leone is a supplier for automotive and commercial vehicle customers, where we're producing the wiring harness. So electrical engineering, I'm an ME, but basically the wiring harness connects the power and signals for everything from a horn to how you switch the machine on. So I was moving from a position as resident engineering team leader to key account manager for our Caterpillar account. A resident engineer is essentially sort of an embedded supplier engineer that sits at an OEM for critical suppliers. Like Leone, you need that really, really close collaboration between the supplier and the customer. The reason for that is you have a $500,000 tractor, you can switch it on if you don't have a metal plate that connects to this or that, right? But you can't even turn it on without the wiring harness. So due to how critical Leone is as a supplier, lots of resident engineers sit on site at different customer locations. It's a great opportunity to learn one company's culture, but also to see another company. So I lead our resident engineering team. So we have residents in North Carolina at Caterpillar Building and Construction. So that's tractors, bulldozers, things like that you might see on the side of the highway. And then we have folks at engines and some other groups in other parts of the country. I'm moving to a sales role slowly, where I'll be a key account manager that oversees the Caterpillar account.
Hi, Ed Zinnicker. I'm currently adjunct professor here at UC, teaching PDP 1011. Someone convinced me to come out of retirement. A former co-op, electrical engineering. My first job was at Cincinnati Bell Telephone, that just changed its name, if you all saw, 150 years later. And I've had kind of an interesting career, sort of like Nathan was talking about. I transitioned out of electrical into information technology. It was just one of these things that within Cincinnati Bell, there was an opportunity. They wanted me to consult on a project for about 18 months, and 17 years later, I left the company that I transitioned to. And then I did other IT organizations from there. My last job that I retired from, my second retirement, was Fifth Third Bank, again, IT. Managed a group of business analysts, and I've had staffs as large as 30, and probably my average was 10. And then after that, I've got my own business. I still operate today, 2 small businesses, one I'm starting to really get away from because I'm getting too old, and that's just remodeling work. See, I just totally walked away from engineering completely, but it's things that I always had interest in. So that's where I am today.
I'm Haley Tippett, and I hate public speaking, so forgive me if it's a bit iffy. I graduated UC in 2020, so a lot of my classes were online last semester, so I didn't get quite as much as you guys are gonna get next year. I work for KFI Engineers. I did co-op with them, but they were actually bought out right when I started working. So it's still the same people, but a completely different company. We do MEP design work for consulting engineers. So we do everything from K-12 work, which is like building a new school, to hospital work. We did the new labs at Revachol right here. And we do MEP, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We do control systems. Personally, I do HVAC for healthcare. So the big new building over there at Children's Hospital, I did that with the rest of our team. So that's the kind of work that we do. I'm the lowest grade engineer, obviously. I graduated 2020, but we have everyone on our staff from new hires to professional engineer, with their certification and all that. And our day-to-day is getting what the architect gives us of a floor plan or a layout of a building and designing the infrastructure. And we do not only HVAC, but utility work. We've worked on the Cincinnati utility plant over by Med Campus, so boilers and all of that kind of work.
Morning, my name is Patrick Fernbach. I work for KLH Engineers. You're in good company.
Yeah.
I'm a very similar
Yeah.
MEP consulting engineer. Currently, I actually am our mechanical engineering manager. So I graduated in 2017. I lead about 30 to 40 people, depending on how many co-ops. We usually have anywhere from 6 to 10 mechanical co-ops, usually 12 to 20 electrical or total co-ops. So, apply for sure. We're always looking for good, strong candidates. Currently, I'm in charge of training, engineer development, onboarding, interviewing, a lot of that kind of stuff, and then I still maintain a design role. So similarly, we do a lot of healthcare, commercial buildings, offices, retail work, grocery work, stuff of that nature. We only do MEP, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and we actually do fire protection as well. So, and then the other thing is very similarly being cross-trained. It's interesting, I started full-time in 2017. I co-op with KLH all 5 terms. They couldn't get rid of me, that's what I always tell them. And then right after graduation, we started a software department. So I just kind of raised my hand, started getting involved in that, learned C#, all that good stuff. Way over my head, didn't even know what I was doing. Ended up transitioning to like more of a scrum leader role. And then basically I was the HVAC department representative, talking about how do we improve our process, how do we increase quality and efficiency and all that good stuff. It's a good journey.
So next question is, when you think about your job after graduation, did you accept that job, right? And then, if so, can you describe the transition from going from co-op to full-time? And then, if not, what was your job search like? And what were some of the challenges along the way? And how long did it take for you to accept a role after graduation? We'll start with Nathan.
Rich, did you say I should start that one off?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and I think that's a great question. For me, I stayed with the company I co-opted with, but what I thought was pretty cool was my company encouraged me to interview at other places just to make sure that Leone was the right fit for me, even after co-oping with them for 5 terms. So I ended up staying at Leone, and I would say the transition was very smooth because I already knew so many people. Leone's been active with co-op since, I would say, I think 2006. So they've been co-oping exclusively with UC. And so through that, our program, when I went through it, was really quite robust. I had a chance to co-op in our office in Indiana, work in sales in Tucson, go to Germany with ICP. And because of that, I knew a lot of people in the company. So to transition into full-time, I think that made it a lot easier. And then with our role as a resident engineer, you're getting involved with design, you're getting involved with hands-on work at the customer, getting on these machines, project management, and you name it. So there's a lot there that maybe it would be hard for a initial grad to unpack. But one thing I saw was that if you work hard during co-op, your company's not going to forget that if you stay with them post-graduation. So you've sort of proven yourself, and they have a chance to hopefully delegate work to you quicker, because they have that trust and confidence in your abilities as an employee. So I would say for me, I would describe the transition as really, really pretty smooth. And also, we'll note that I forgot to mention before, my company is hiring if there's engineers looking for jobs.
Yeah, I did stay with Cincinnati after my co-op. And transition, not a lot. Kind of, I was co-op plus I worked full or part-time, so it was almost a full-time position for me when I was still going to college. But my responsibilities pretty much were the same, but the one thing that I did realize the longer I was there is just understanding the corporate structure. There's things like HR and accounting, and how does that happen? You go as a co-op and you just go, okay, all I have to do is focus on this. Well, everything you do is impacted. You want it to be impacting the bottom line of the corporation, and how is that? So that's some of the transition that I had to understand and figure out. When my bosses started coming to me and saying, hey, you're overspending my budget, what does that mean? So those are things you need to really look at, understand, and know really how that corporation is or any business is actually operated.
Yeah, so I stayed with my company. I did all 5 co-op terms with a company called Fossick and Hilmer, and then we merged with KFI Engineers a couple months after I got hired. So I had finally gotten used to a structure of a company, and then the structure completely changed, but all the people stayed the same, which was very nice, because then you still had that trust built up from when I was a co-op to now. Our company prides ourselves on giving co-ops engineer level work. So the work I did didn't change as much, although then you had to take responsibility when you did it wrong. When you're a co-op, you can say, oh, I was just a co-op, it's okay. When you get, higher up in the company, other people are then depending on you to make sure that it's right. My transition also happened right when COVID hit, so I transitioned into a full-time employee from home. So that was interesting, as you all know. I assume you guys co-op during COVID at some point. It can be difficult, and I was lucky enough that I got to stay with my company. I had a lot of friends who had job offers that got taken away because of COVID hitting. But all in all, in the end, I feel like half the time I'm doing the same stuff I did, 3 years ago when I was a co-op. It's just a lot more responsibilities placed on you, and they have the confidence in you to get it all done.
Before Patrick responds, I want to follow up with you on a question or on a statement you mentioned. Your co-op company got bought out, right? Mm-hmm. Talk about the process on the time you were told, hey, the company got bought out, to, hey, you still have a job.
It was a scary couple of weeks for everybody, I think. We had been told that there were merger discussions, and then we were told they were on hold, and then I was in the car driving with my family somewhere, and all of a sudden I get an email that says, we are now KFI Engineers. Really no warning, and they sent out an organization chart that kind of said who our new supervisors were and all of that, and luckily the group I was in stayed the same. But even looking at the chart, you see names that are no longer on there. My co-op advisor was no longer on there, the guy who had actually hired me back when I was a freshman. And so it was like a lot of change in that, obviously change in higher up leadership, which made the transition different because every company does things differently. And our company had been around for 130 years, something like that, and doing things the same way for that long. But I know it was difficult, and even after I'd received a contract of, we're keeping you on, I had just reviewed a contract a couple months earlier of getting hired, and then there were changes to the contract, and it was being hired almost a second time without the interview process. And throughout the first couple of months, we still had people being let go. And I think most of the people in the company, their plan was, I'm going to do my job and do it the best way I know how, and show how I am indispensable to this new company. And then that's how we all kind of moved forward from there.
So, I'm gonna start at the beginning of my co-op terms because it's like a journey, just like everything else. I started first term, and quite honestly, at the end of my first term, I worked at KLH, MEP consulting engineer, a lot of time on the computer. I remember calling my buddy and I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I was getting kind of drove nuts sitting at my desk. I went back second term just because I thought, hey, I should go back to second term. I ended up, making sure I returned back to the same employer, same team, and I just went in with a different mindset. And that mindset was, I'm just gonna ask more questions than anybody can ever answer. I'm gonna stay curious. And that kind of propelled me forward. So second term, did a lot of HVAC on office buildings. Third and fourth term, did a lot of commercial plumbing, and I just kept raising my hand for everything I could. I ended up realizing my first term I was bored, just doing the same thing. And a lot of those co-op terms was a lot of me putting my headphones in and just cranking through work, asking a ton of questions when I came to them. And then my fifth term, I was just running projects. So that was my goal. By the time I was fourth term, I was like, hey, fifth term, I basically want to be a full-time engineer. I'm going to, pretty much act like a full-time engineer. I'm going to maintain my standards like a full-time engineer would. One of my mentors that kind of coached me through all of my 5 terms pretty much looked at me and he said, hey, I want you to start delegating to co-ops. I got an offer that September. So I was going into my senior year, accepted the offer because I was loving my job. So total 180. And then from there, I just took, when I graduated, I just kept raising my hand, staying curious, learning a bunch of different things. From that, I kind of looking back, it's kind of crazy because I don't really think I could have planned my career like I did. And I think kind of going into transition and those skills was really what I learned after my first term at co-op. Reflecting a lot on, hey, what can I do differently? Do I really want to be an engineer? All those questions rolling through my head. The answers I came back in, I'm going to stay curious, I'm going to keep learning. I think the only thing that really helped me transition, because I was volunteering so many, items, just putting in a ton of hours, for me it was fun at that point in time. And I think after graduation, the thing that really helped me transition better was focusing on people skills. So as engineering students, we always, or at least I, kind of just thought, hey, I need math and science, I need physics. But I took an interpersonal communication course my senior year. I started focusing on how do I delegate, how do I time manage. By the time I was full time, I remember my mentor was just like, you're still a time manager, keep it up, but teach everybody else that too. So I was kind of training other people, like this is how I manage my time, this is how I don't miss deadlines and all that good stuff, teaching co-ops that way. And I think from that point, it was just, it's just been a fun ride ever since. So it's a journey. It's not, I'm still transitioning. I'm like 5 years out of school, so.
You mentioned that transition and how you've evolved. Patrick, if you could just talk about like, if you had to think about that time of your senior year, what would be things that you wish you would have done then that would have been helpful for you coming out?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I actually took notes on that. I think the biggest thing I think I would have done is taken more interpersonal type of like people skill courses. You learn a lot of math and science. I wish I would have done that because that one course I took throughout my 5 years here was great. I learned a lot. I use it every day. I use all the other stuff every day too, but focusing on that more and then taking my FE, so fundamentals of engineering. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure you're in a similar boat. We hire a lot of people that don't take their FE right out of graduation. You wait 3 years. So I think focusing on that more. And even if you're not going into construction, like a lot of people think, well, I'm not going into construction, I'm not going to take my FE. I've hired a lot of people from GE, P&G that worked on aircrafts 2 years ago. Now they're kind of like at 5 years into their industry or into the industry, they're like, I want to take my PE now, but now they have to retake their FE. So it's this whole, step backwards. So I think I waited 2.5 years. I wish I would have just taken it my senior year, to be honest.
Again, we're in the same industry, so we have a lot of the same things yes, you have to be able to talk to other people. I know it's always a joke, engineers, we sit in our little cube, you do your own thing on your computer, and I find our office has lots of different generations in it. We have people who are old enough, probably my great-grandfather still working in there, and then we have co-ops. And I think that the newer people coming in are a lot more sociable, and they're able to do it, but even then, it's important to know how to communicate. And they put not enough emphasis, I think, on UC, on teaching engineers how to communicate. and how to manage your time and how to manage other people. Because in the end, you're going to be probably working in a team, and you need to be able to work with other people well. Also, echoing what he said about the FE. Even if you don't think you're going into an industry where you will eventually want your professional engineering license, take your FE now. It doesn't expire. You don't have to do anything to keep it. And it's a test over everything you have learned in college. So I took it just this past year, and I graduated in 2020. And you guys forget everything over the summer, okay? It's like I forgot. I had this beam and I had to find the loads on it, and I was like, I know how to do this, but I can't for the life of me remember. And we have a lot of people right now in the office who were out of school 20 years ago trying to take this exam. So just take it. Even if you don't pass it the first time, at least just take it, know what it's like, get a feel for it. And I think that's very important to do before you forget all of this stuff that you learned in school. Because I find in the industry, you use the theory that we've learned, but it's not the same. You learn then your industry, you learn specifically kind of what you're doing and what your employer wants you guys to do. But it's great to get those, or any sort of certifications. I know UC also offers lead classes. Any sort of certification, especially those that don't expire, they're great to have under your belt, especially in the hiring process, or if you ever want to change jobs or anything like that.
As a follow-up, when's the ideal time to take the FE?
You can take an FE your last semester of an accredited bachelor's degree. So you guys can all take it next spring, right? You guys all graduate next spring. So you guys can all take it next spring. And I would say the sooner you take it, the better, in my opinion. And UC also, I know they offered, again, it got canceled because they offered it in 2020, but I was in a class that was a review class offered, I believe by Tribunal, that they walk you through and they teach you they review everything you need to know. And they even help you give you study materials and all of that stuff. So I'd say the ideal time is while you're still in school and you're still used to taking tests. Because my supervisor, she's been out of school for 20 years and she's like, I haven't taken a test in 20 years. I don't remember how to study for it. I don't remember how to sit and concentrate, especially because she has 4 kids screaming around her. So do it before you guys have 4 kids screaming around you, too.
Of course, my graduation was a few years ago, and a lot of things didn't exist then that do today, but some of the things that I learned. One, project management. I think that's probably taught here, I hope, because everybody has it. And actually hit us in a corporate environment. We were doing a project for a Japanese telephone company, and it wasn't going well. And we, as an IT organization, hadn't adopted project management. And we finally got some consultants in. We started utilizing project management. It's never 100%, especially in software development. Construction, I think, is a little bit better because when things are done, software is a little bit tougher, but very important. So that's one of the things I felt that I like coming out of that education. But also, as has already been mentioned, the soft skills. Today, I'm teaching emotional intelligence. Remember PDP 1011. It is very important. That is really, you can listen to the other professors that say that's what makes you a good leader, and it is. It's a soft skills. You have to know how to interact with people. You have to be part of a team. How do you contribute to that team? How do you lead that team? And then, as you manage people, how do you keep them moving forward? So, we all as engineers, you take those fluff courses, I call them, and you go, oh, I'll never need this. Well, those are very important. Becomes more important than actually your technical skills as you're there. So, and then as I mentioned before, just on understanding how that corporation works. What are the internal workings of it? You've got HR, you've got training, like I said, it's finance, accounting, all those things in addition to your own process groups that you deal with. So that's my feedback and my view from a few years ago.
And so, as a reminder, Nathan, as you think about your experiences during your senior year, what were things you wish you had known more about prior to graduating?
I think it's a great question. I would really say a lot of what was just said is probably something that comes to mind to me for that as well, where the development of soft skills it's not always something that we're able to do just in our engineering classes, and possibly we're not able to touch on it during our co-ops. Another thing is looking at companies, whether it's the one you co-op with or other co-ops you're interested in, to look at what might be a midterm plan for me at this company, right? If there's 30 engineers who report up to one guy, and it doesn't look like that guy is going anywhere anytime soon, what position might I be in 5 years into my career, looking for opportunities to grow? Is that there? Does my company have a culture to support other young folks starting their career? I think if you co-op there, understanding that might be already evident, but maybe taking an opportunity during that last rotation to interact with some of the recent hires to get some honest opinions from them on how things have went for them. And then I think during my senior year, I was looking at offers from companies that I had interviewed with, both Leone, the company I stayed with, and others. And I think when I was looking at the offers, if I'm being honest, I was really looking for two numbers. One was, how much are you going to pay me, and how many weeks of vacation am I going to get? And after graduating, I was lucky to find that my company had great benefits and really understand what does that mean when you look at your medical insurance, or maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, if you're trying to start a family, you want to spend a couple weeks, if you have a kid or your wife has a kid. So I was lucky to find that, but it easily could have turned out differently. I think some people have mentioned also looking at industry trends. I heard someone mention something about a merger. Some of those things, it's really insider information that you wouldn't know, but looking at an industry trend to see, hey, is the industry trending in the right direction for me to start my career here? Is there going to be a big drop next year that would make them, consider what type of org changes are going to be there? And I think something that I didn't think about that all of you should be thinking about is how has the world changed in the last 2.5 years, and what are the realities of the work environment you're going to go into? I think it's really challenging for us to be onboarded remotely. Many of us are probably pretty tired of online classes and want to get back in person. But I think the future of work looks like hybrid, almost 100% across the board, and a lot of virtual interaction. And if I was in your shoes going into your senior year, I'd be thinking of how do I figure out how to put my best foot forward and really maximize my career, understanding that I'm likely not going to be sitting right next to an experienced engineer or salesperson in my office and learning with them like that. It's going to take a lot of Zoom meetings, Teams calls, things like that in most cases to get up to speed. And the quicker we're able to come to terms with that, the better opportunity we have of really settling in and getting work done.
I'll save the last question for last, at the very end, but I want to open up the floor to you all. What questions do you have for our panel? Yeah. Go for it.
UC presents a very wide range of expected salaries at graduation. What's a realistic number or range that we should expect?
Somebody want to go first?
No, I can't address that.
I know when I was looking, so I didn't have a number. Like, I didn't know what number to be looking for when my company was able to offer me a letter. I went online to UC's website, and they had like mechanical engineer average starting salary, and I believe it was $69,000. But what you have to understand is, if you're going to a company that understands what you did for co-op, they understand what co-oping is, I think they're more likely to lean more towards that number, because you guys are in a different place than somebody who went to, say, OU and never has been in an industry before. And I think that's something that you might need to, when you're dealing with a contract, make sure that they understand. Because I've worked with other companies that when I even interviewed with other companies, that when I said, oh, I co-op, they're like, oh, you interned over the summers, like whatever. And I was like, no, I like full-time worked in the industry, and they were only willing to offer me, you know, $30,000 less than what I ended up getting from a company that understood what co-op was and how valuable it is to already have that information. So I'd say that number is that's where I got my number from. It might be totally wrong, but I got it from UC's website is where I got it.
One of the things to remember too, because I had this experience hiring some co-ops, and it goes back to what I said, I had a budget. I could only spend so much, and HR would only support so much on salary. Well, in a way. What they did is they brought me an intern or a co-op with a salary expectation that was higher than half my staff. And that's difficult to bring someone in. And I personally pushed back because I said, I can't bring this person in for that kind of money, right? Because our staff isn't making that kind of money. So that's also that balance where there's that expectation, and maybe that range is out there, and you can look that up anywhere besides UC. But you've got to get comfortable where you are, and maybe it's middle ground, and that's part of negotiation also. And also be willing to walk away. If it's not what you want, you be willing to say no, even though you're going, gee, I could have some money in my hand, right? Because fortunately, there's a lot of jobs out there.
Could you use numbers in that situation? So like what was the co-op expecting versus what was reasonable?
Well, keep in mind, I've been around a while. My first co-op job, I made $1.65 an hour, if that gives you an idea. And that was a lot of money to me back then, right? No, so this was right around the $50,000 range, and this is an IT position, and most of my staff were in that $40,000 to $45,000 range. And this was a person who was going to have to sit and work and learn from these people, and that was the challenge I had. So just some things from a management perspective you got to deal with.
Yeah, so, I mean, a range, starting out in construction, 60 to 70,000. You know, I think that's pretty reasonable. But I'll kind of echo specifically what you should be looking for is that salary, but then also what Nathan was hitting on, how much PTO. I think you should ask about benefits. The way that we deliver our offers is a comprehensive package. So we'll tell you what your total, you know, I guess compensation would be in terms of, because we pay for benefits. You know, somewhere else you might have to pay for your own benefits. So we actually deliver that as a total package. Talk about bonuses. You know, think about the bonus structure. We try to set up our company so that when we're busy and we're making money, our employees are making more money. You know, we try to treat our employees fairly and give them a fair salary, you know, just like I think most companies do. But those are the types of things that you guys should be asking about. And then really hit on culture. I think Nathan hit on that. You know, you can get paid $75,000 out of school a year probably, and you're probably going to be working $55 to $70. And some people love that, and that's totally fine. Like I know a guy at AK Steel, he doesn't even have an engineering degree. He's making probably $70,000 working a machine. He works 95 hours a week. He's off the next week, and then he works 95 hours again. I mean, it's all what you want in life, and you just have to be thinking about all those things.
I think Patrick hit on something too. It's very important, is benefits. One of the big things for me is 401k retirement. I know, you know, when you're at your age, you're going, I don't want to think about that, but boy, this is the time to think about it. But to me, that's the other big key. And understanding the contribution the company makes to that. So it's one thing you probably want to at least investigate. How does that work? What's that look like? Especially as it's offered to you as a benefit package. Because it can be important. Trust me. It finally worked. It worked for me.
I think there's some benefits you don't even think about too that you need to start thinking about. I work downtown, so it's, you know, $20 to park down there every single day, but they pay for my parking. So that's something, you know, it seems like a small thing, but that's a lot of money when it adds up. Plus, it's a parking pass that works all the time, so anytime I'm going downtown, I have free parking. So it's like even small things like that. Do they, if you do a trip somewhere, if you have to travel, do they reimburse? Do they provide learning opportunities paid for that you could continue your education? It's small things even to ask in an interview that might not come up on your contract that really can add up in the end.
Nathan, can you briefly talk about your benefits package and the generality of it?
Rich, did you ask something? Sorry, it's really
Yeah.
hard to hear you guys.
Yeah, can you briefly talk about your benefits package and sort of a general, like, well, because you mentioned something about, time off and things of that nature. Can you talk about a little bit more about, being in the industry that you're in, what's the benefits package in general?
Okay, what's my benefits package? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So the key thing for me was loving to travel, and Leone I have 7 weeks of vacation now on top of a 2-week plant shutdown at the end of the year. So I'm not really going anywhere cool right now, but that is a nice amenity to have when we're able to travel more now. If we're working in a Leone office, they have great coffee and snacks and things like that are more of minor things, not really huge, but really looking to develop the office experience. For education, let's say you want to get a master's degree in engineering or MBA, they're gonna cover that, and in a way where you could feel comfortable taking that on, and not, some companies say, hey, if you get a 98% on all your classes, we'll cover it. That's pretty daunting, right? Working 40 hours a week. So it's a reasonable expectation for what you have to contribute to get that MBA. They have maternity leave, obviously. They're establishing paternity leave. Benefits are really great as well. So that's kind of a quick overview.
Other questions?
How useful do you all see master's degrees in the industry now?
You want to go first?
Sure. And construction, I'll be blunt, master's in engineering, I don't know if it'll really get you anywhere further than what you would get with those years of experience in the industry. I mean, be pretty blunt. I think like an MBA is valuable. I almost pursued an MBA right out of college. I actually went to our COO and president. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Give me some insight. I went to my direct supervisor. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Give me some insight. And they kind of told me, because they both had their MBA. They said, I'd recommend you waiting until you're in a position where you can use that, because a lot of it is workshop based, it's skills building, and you're using a lot of those classes and that content based on specific scenarios that you're working through at work. So they kind of recommended, they said, hey, look, if you want to do it, do it. But they kind of recommended waiting. And now I'm in a position where I'm kind of going, oh yeah, maybe I should start thinking about my MBA, so that's my experience with it. But
Again, same industry. Engineering, masters, I don't think it's a bad thing. If you love school and you want to learn more, one of the engineers I work with on a daily basis, he has a master's degree. He's very, very smart, and I think it helps him, but I don't think it helps him in the day-to-day of what we're doing. I think it might help him understand the bigger picture of things. But also echoing, MBA might be more beneficial depending on what your end goal is. In our industry, the most beneficial piece of paper you have is your professional engineering license. That's your big one. That kind of makes you in charge. But if you kind of are like, I think I might want to run a company or be a high up, a director or something like that, an MBA I think could be very beneficial, and even more so than a master's in engineering.
So here's my view on that. Masters, number one, understand what that master's means within your corporation. Do they support it in the extent that they will entice you to take it for a change in position, more responsibility? When I did mine, that was all great, had it done, everyone, congratulations, and I just continued on. But I also recommended this to my son. He got his MBA, and I said, here's the thing. You get it now, why, like Nathan was saying, they're paying for it in this company, and that's the tool to get you to your next job. So that's another way to look at it, because as you're in that environment working, and I don't want to, I'm not disavowing an MBA, but you get your MBA and they go, okay, now what did that change for you? What are you bringing? So you have to demonstrate that, right? And that's part of that leadership, mentoring, and moving yourself around within the company. Back to what Nathan was saying, something I tried to do. I was in a big enough corporation. Every 5 years or so, I looked around to see where I could go to move myself within the organization. And sometimes that helps having an MBA. I know that's not a direct answer, but it's just beware of a lot of time investment, and is it going to be valued where you are working at the current time? And if not, it's at least that next resume to get you into a new position potentially. And I'll go back. When I was in college, undergrad was the big degree, right? And before that was associate's degrees. Well, now it's the master's that sets you apart from everybody else that has the bachelor's.
Nathan, you mentioned getting tuition remission. Are you in a master's program right now?
I am not, and I think that the last point just made is really, really important, where for my career, I see myself getting more into account management, and have kind of went through like an unofficial MBA, so to speak, on those topics specifically, just with some of the other things I'm involved in. So I'm not in an MBA program, and don't plan to be. But I think a really important thing just said is, if you're thinking about going that route, you need to align your company's plans for you with that plan for professional development or whatever that growth is. I've had friends who got a project management certification, a MBA, and have approached their companies and said, okay, now I have an MBA, or now I have the PMP certification. Company said, okay, cool. We don't have that in our plan for you in your current position. We would have something open moving forward. So some of us come in maybe with whether it's what our parents have or what we've just personally been interested in, and have let me get a master's in engineering or an MBA or whatever it might be, without first having that conversation with our management to see if that's something that more than just them paying for, there's actually some return on that time investment.
Yeah, I think the other point I'd like to make with that too is the MBA can also give you those skills that, as we talked about, emotional intelligence, right? How does that change you and benefit you so that you can be a better corporate citizen, so to speak, that then you're recognized to move you up into different positions also. Because it does hopefully teach you some of those soft skills and some of the business skills and things that you'll need as you go from engineering into sales like Nathan is. And I was in contract negotiations for international contract negotiations as an engineer. Who knew, So.
One more question from our audience.
For those that interview people, what is your favorite interview question to ask, and what kinds of responses do you want to get from asking that question?
I'm going to think for a minute because there was one, but I can't remember it. It's been a while. Because my team came up with it, and hopefully it'll come to me. I can tell you one of my worst interview questions I had, but we'll get to that.
I've actually never interviewed anybody. I just this year became in charge of the mechanical interns, so I might be interviewing here for this upcoming semester. I know at the career fair, my favorite thing to ask was, what are you interested in? Because, oh man, they get nervous and then they start to babble about like trying to make it sound like they're really interested in what your company does. And it's like, don't answer it that. If you come in and we ask, what are you interested in, like mechanically or electrically or whatever you're doing, tell us. Like, don't try to make it sound like if you came to interview for me and I work in healthcare and say, I am just so interested in designing the airflow for an OR. Like, now don't get me wrong, that's super cool. It is. But you're not actually interested in that. Because we want to know where your interest lies so we can find a place for you. Not to try to be like, oh, their interests don't lie with us, let's kick them out. It's always great to have different interest, because then it helps the group get better.
So I start every interview the same way, and we do a lot of virtual interviews. I'm just a firm believer in the fact that if I kind of set the cadence early, so at the beginning of the interview, I'm immediately like, hey, we'll do some introductions on our end. I usually have one more person on there, and then I say, hey, tell us about yourself, and if you have any questions. That's not a question, but it's a test. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to introduce myself, somebody else might introduce themselves, and you got to introduce yourselves, and then it's kind of like, do you sit there awkwardly, or do you jump into the questions that you have for us? So I'm kind of testing a little bit to see if you can retain, follow conversation. That's kind of a hidden question, but I think that question in itself, what questions you have for us is my favorite question. I've had people that come to the interview and they're like, oh yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm like, okay. Then the second person has 17 questions. I don't get to ask a single question. That's my favorite question. Because it tells me you're thinking, right? You're thinking about your future, you're thinking about your career. If I don't ask a single question in the interview, that's the best interview I could have ever had. If you come in, what is this position going to look like? What's my day-to-day going to look like? What's your mentoring and coaching structure? How do you grow your employees? What's your culture like? You're just beating me over the side of the head with questions. That means that you really care about your career, and that's the biggest thing that I can see from a candidate.
Did you get all those questions down?
Yeah.
So Nathan, if you've interviewed people in the past, what's your favorite interview question? And what do you want to get out of that interview question?
Oh man, that's a hard one. So I run our co-op program and also have hired full-time, so entry level and even mid-career level. And so I think for co-ops, I don't know that I have a favorite question, but I really like some of the comments previously made by the rest of the panel on really searching for authenticity and what your genuine interests are. And maybe that lines up with what our company does, maybe it doesn't. And that initiative to be actively engaged with the interview, it can be tough in person. I think it can be especially tough when it's let's say a Zoom meeting and it's someone from HR or the hiring manager and then someone. So I would say coming in with an understanding of the company, what the company does, really shows, right? You don't need to be super knowledgeable on the inner workings from a technical perspective on what the company's doing, but just to understand the company and to be yourself, be your authentic self. I think that really shows, and the questions are easy for you to answer.
And so if you could finish,
Yeah, let me make one more comment, because I did, going back to what Nathan, I think Patrick has touched on. It's not so much a question, but be energetic. And here's one example I had. I was at Fifth Third Bank interviewing a gal that worked for me years ago when I was at Convergence. I knew her, very good technically, and I wanted her on my team. In our interview process at Fifth Third was 5 managers interviewed, including the CIO. Anyway, she came to me, I was first, and we interviewed. Of course, it's hard to interview someone you already know what their background is, but she wasn't energetic. And I told her, I said, you've got to show you have excitement about coming to this team. Okay, I'll do that. 4 managers interview her there, come back to me, she didn't have the personality for the team, didn't show that energy, right? Very good technically, and I know she was. I want her on my team, but I couldn't get the other managers, and I understood it. So if anything else, you've got to show your excitement for that too. And then, as Nathan said, you'll be ready for the answers, no matter what they ask, because they can ask anything. Like I said, I had a very bizarre one I won't go into because we're running out of time.
Yeah. So last question, real brief. What's your best piece of advice to give to folks that are about to graduate?
I think for me, obviously, do your research. I think we've all talked about it, on the company that you're going to select. And understand, especially if it's an organization you've co-opted with, understand what that environment's like, personality traits, Is this the place I can get up in the morning to go to quite a bit? And then also with some opportunities beyond what I'm starting at, and understand if that corporation's large enough for you to move on. And unfortunately, we talk about in co-op all the time, or co-op reflections. It is that. You're going to have to do your reflections almost all the time and figure that out. So just be wary as you get into it. It's a whole different environment. You got to get up and go to work every day, be responsible, take on responsibilities of maybe some very major things. As an engineer, you're designing structures that have to stand upright or properly operate. And so you got to understand that that's a responsibility you're taking on.
Just try to find a place that fits you and that you like. There's nothing worse than being in a place where you feel like you're not being challenged, like you're not getting anything done, like you don't like the people you work with. No matter what that salary is at the end of the day, you got to actually like what you're doing, or at least find it interesting, find it challenging. Don't be afraid to try new things, take on opportunities, because if you're in the right team, they're not going to let you ruin an entire project, right? Go ahead and say, okay, yeah, I'll try this. Ask questions, do the best you can, and then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And that's the same with companies, projects, or anything. Be open to different opportunities and be open to change that fits your personality, your lifestyle, and then find the group that you fit in with. Because in the end, you'll do better work that way. You'll just be happier that way and not as stressed out that way.
Yeah, so I've actually got a question for you all. How many people are thinking about salaries? Raise your hand. I mean, let's be honest, we're all thinking about how much we're going to make, right? Keep your hand up if you're comfortable talking about how much you want to make. Like, honestly, you would look at the president and say, hey, I don't think that this is a fair offer. The amount of hands, I'd be really surprised if everybody's really comfortable there. Going back and saying, hey, this isn't the value that I have. That was something that coming out of college was really hard for me. Not comfortable talking about money. Just not. All through high school, college, we didn't really talk about money. So just be really comfortable in that area. Know your value, know your worth. And it's okay to come and say, hey, I see your offer at 62. I think I'm worth 66. And if they don't come back at you with a counter, walk away, or compromise and say, hey, I really want to meet me in the middle. It's okay to have those conversations. It can be a little nerve-wracking when you're in the moment. The most disrespectful thing that you can do from an employer standpoint is to just not say anything. Not have an open dialogue. I mean, it's very rare that I'm, working with our president, COO, putting together offers and going, wow, I can't believe that they actually communicated with us about what their expectations are. So, I mean, that's honestly how employers get feedback on salary. We don't have like this crystal ball that says, here's what the market is paying. We kind of get insight from, hey, so-and-so offered me this. I really want to work here. I love your culture, all these things, right? But meet me somewhere in the middle. I feel like my value is here. And just be really comfortable with that. And I think on that point, don't go in saying, hey, I want 66. That's probably how I'm coming off. But come in and say, hey, I really want to understand where this number's coming from. You're giving me 62. Can you explain that to me? Because now you're all of a sudden like starting a dialogue. You're starting a conversation. It's a lot more professional than, that's unfair. That's unprofessional. I want this much, right? Hey, how did you come up with this number? Can we have a conversation about it? And the answer is probably yes. Come into my office, let's sit down. So that's the thing that I didn't know out of graduation. Just get comfortable there.
Nathan, finish us out.
Is this on advice, just general advice?
Yep, general advice.
Okay, couple things. Pick a boss in your 20s over the company. If you can learn as much as possible in your 20s, doesn't matter where you're working. That's the most important thing. Often we think of, man, what's a good boss, what's a bad boss? And if we're evaluating ourselves, we're terrible bosses, right? We're not interested in our personal development and growth and everything that we're maybe looking for other people to do for us. So your initiative is really key in determining the career you have. And my number one advice is that the money will come if you invest in your development. Time is not renewable. I don't wake up in the middle of the night dreaming about wiring harnesses. I love working at Leone, because of the work-life balance, and most importantly, the people I work with that support me. I've had a lot of friends that left Cincinnati, maybe started their career at a company like Toyota or P&G, and they got pulled away to some company in Silicon Valley that pay them $150,000 to work out of there. And 3 months into those types of jobs, they're miserable. They're working 80 hours a week. Their relationships are in total shambles. So the money will come. If you build sort of a sustainable path for yourself in your 20s, you'll really thank yourself when you're 30.
So I'd like to thank our panelists for today. Thank you for the advice and your perspectives. And for you all, we will talk about some of these other topics that came up. One is licensure, the other one is salary negotiation in the coming weeks. So we'll talk about that later on in the next couple of months. So again, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.